What happens when a Hollywood legend who has never backed down from a fight sits across the table from a woman who has built an entire career on saying exactly what everyone else is afraid to say? Before you settle in, before the tension even starts to creep under your skin, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit like, and drop a comment right now, because stories like this don't just unfold, they explode. The studio lights of The View were already blazing when Robert De Niro stepped onto the stage. The applause came fast, loud, automatic. This was muscle memory for the audience. Decades of standing ovations compressed into a single moment. He waved politely, a tight smile on his face, but there was something off. His eyes didn't scan the crowd the way they usually did. They didn't sparkle. They locked forward, like a man walking into a room knowing exactly where the fire was coming from. Across the curved table sat Whoopi Goldberg, already watching him. Not smiling. Not scowling either. Just waiting. You could feel it before a single word was spoken. That low, electric hum that creeps into a room when two strong personalities know they're about to collide. The producers felt it. The crew felt it. Even the audience, people who had come for coffee table chatter and polite disagreements, shifted in their seats without knowing why. De Niro took his seat, adjusted the microphone clipped to his jacket, and exhaled slowly. The camera caught it. A long breath. The kind someone takes before they decide whether to stay quiet or tell the truth. Whoopi leaned back slightly, hands folded, eyes steady. She'd been here for decades. Politicians, actors, scandals, breakdowns. Nothing rattled her easily. But this wasn't just another guest. This was a man whose anger had become almost legendary in recent years. A man who didn't separate his art from his beliefs anymore. The host to Whoopi's left tried to kick things off lightly. "So, Robert, it's great to have you here." But Whoopi raised a hand. "Before we go into the usual," she said calmly, her voice smooth but firm, "I want to ask something that's been sitting out there for a while." The audience murmured. De Niro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Whoopi turned fully toward him now. "You've been very outspoken," she continued. "Very. And a lot of people feel inspired by that. But a lot of people also feel alienated. Do you ever worry that the way you speak, no filter, no holding back, might be doing more harm than good?" The question landed like a dropped plate. Sharp. Loud. Impossible to ignore. De Niro stared at her for a moment. Not angrily. Not yet. More like he was measuring the distance between them, deciding how far he was willing to go on live television. "Harm," he repeated slowly. Whoopi nodded. "Yeah, harm. Because words matter. Especially when they come from someone with your influence." There it was. The opening shot. De Niro leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped. His voice, when it came, was low and controlled. "You know what is harm?" he said. "Silence. Silence is what does harm." A few audience members clapped instinctively. Others stayed quiet. Whoopi didn't interrupt. She let him go on. That was her style, give someone just enough rope. "For years," De Niro continued, "people with power have gotten away with things because nobody wanted to make anyone uncomfortable. I'm done with that. If being honest makes people uncomfortable, maybe that's the point." Whoopi tilted her head slightly. "Honest is one thing," she replied. "But there's a line between honesty and turning every conversation into a battlefield." De Niro's eyes flickered. The first crack. "A battlefield?" he echoed, his voice rising just a notch. "You think this is a game? You think what's happening out there," he gestured vaguely, beyond the studio walls, toward the world at large, "is something we can talk about politely and hope it fixes itself?" The audience shifted again. The cameras cut to faces, wide eyes, pressed lips, hands hovering near applause but not quite clapping. Whoopi leaned forward now, matching his posture. "No," she said. "I think when you talk the way you do, you stop listening. And when people stop listening to each other, that's when things really fall apart." For a split second, De Niro looked genuinely taken aback. Not offended, challenged. "I listen," he said sharply. "I listen plenty. I just don't agree with what I hear." "That's not listening," Whoopi shot back. "That's waiting for your turn to talk." The audience gasped. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd, quickly dying out. De Niro straightened in his chair, his calm beginning to fracture. "You're telling me," he said, pointing gently but deliberately across the table, "that speaking out against things I believe are dangerous is wrong." "I'm telling you," Whoopi replied without hesitation, "that when you reduce people to villains and idiots, you close the door to change." The temperature in the room spiked. De Niro shook his head, a humorless chuckle escaping him. See, that's where we disagree, he said. Some doors should be closed. Now the applause came, louder, more divided. Half the audience clapped hard. The other half sat frozen, arms crossed, eyes darting between the two icons locked in verbal combat. Whoopi's voice softened, but somehow that made it more dangerous. And who decides that, Robert? She asked. You. The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing. For a moment, De Niro didn't answer. The cameras zoomed in close enough to catch the tension in his face, the clenched jaw, the narrowing eyes, the conflict between restraint and release. Finally, he spoke. No, he said quietly. History does. The studio fell silent. Even the applause signs stayed dark. Whoopi leaned back, absorbing the weight of his words. She looked at him not as an opponent now, but as something closer to an equal. Someone standing on the same battlefield, even if they disagreed on how to fight. That's a dangerous thing to believe, she said softly. Because history is written by people, and people are flawed. De Niro opened his mouth to respond, but the commercial break light flashed red. A producer's voice crackled faintly through the earpieces. Cut. Pause. Reset. The audience buzzed with whispers, half-formed opinions, heated side conversations. Social media phones were already lighting up in laps, fingers flying, clips being recorded despite the rules. De Niro leaned back, rubbing his temples. Whoopi stared straight ahead, expression unreadable. This wasn't over. Not even close. And when the cameras came back on, the masks were going to drop even further. Because when no filter meets no fear, something has to break. The red light above the main camera flicked back on, and just like that, the air changed. Whatever pause the commercial break had offered was gone. No reset. No cooling down. If anything, the silence during the ads had sharpened everything, like two fighters standing in opposite corners, listening to the crowd scream their names while the bell waited to ring. The applause cue lit up, and the audience clapped, loud, uneven, unsure of what they were clapping for. The claps echoed off the walls of the view, but they couldn't drown out the tension sitting at the table. The camera found Robert De Niro first. He looked different now. The careful restraint he'd walked in with was thinning. His shoulders were stiff, his hands no longer folded neatly but resting flat on the table, fingers spread as if grounding himself. Decades of playing controlled, dangerous men had trained him well, but this wasn't a role. This was live. This was real. Then the shot cut to Whoopi Goldberg. She was calm, almost unnervingly so. Chin lifted, eyes steady, the posture of someone who had survived too many storms to fear another one. But behind that calm was focus. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew exactly how far she was willing to push. The moderator tried to steer them back toward safer waters. Let's talk about. De Niro cut in. No, he said, voice firm. Let's finish this. The audience reacted instantly. A ripple of oaths, a few sharp inhales, a smattering of applause that died as quickly as it started. Whoopi turned toward him fully now. All right, she said. Then let's finish it. There was no smile. No softening. De Niro leaned forward again. You said I stopped listening, he began. But what I see is people talking in circles while things get worse. I'm tired of pretending that being polite is more important than being honest. Whoopi nodded slowly. And I'm tired of pretending that yelling the loudest means you're right. That landed harder than shouting ever could. De Niro's lips pressed together. For a moment, he looked almost hurt, not offended, but frustrated in a deeper way. You think this is about volume? He asked. You think I enjoy being angry? Whoopi didn't answer immediately. She studied him, really looked at him, like she was trying to read between the lines of everything he wasn't saying. I think, she said carefully, that anger can become addictive. And once it does, you stop seeing people. You only see sides. The audience murmured again. This time it was uneasy. De Niro laughed, sharp and quick. Sides exist, he said. Whether you like it or not. And bridges disappear. Whoopi shot back. Whether you notice or not. The tension was no longer just ideological. It was personal now. Two worldviews, both forged by decades of experience, colliding in real time. De Niro gestured around the table, around the studio. You think these conversations change anything? He asked. People go home, they argue online, and tomorrow everything's the same. And what's your solution? Whoopi challenged. Burn it all down? That did it. De Niro's voice rose, not shouting but vibrating with intensity. My solution is to stop lying to ourselves, he said. To stop acting like every opinion deserves equal respect. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Whoopi's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in disbelief. That's dangerous, she said flatly. That's how people get erased. No, De Niro snapped. That's how accountability happens. The moderator shifted uncomfortably, hands clasped, clearly unsure whether to intervene or let it unfold. Producers in the control room were already sweating. This was gold for ratings, but a nightmare for control. Whoopi leaned back, then forward again, voice steady but edged with steel. Accountability without compassion is just cruelty dressed up as courage, she said. For the first time, De Niro didn't respond immediately. The audience noticed. You could hear it in the silence, the way everyone leaned in, waiting to see if he would explode or retreat. Instead, his voice dropped. You think I don't have compassion? He asked quietly. Whoopi softened, just a fraction. I think you do, she said. I just think it gets lost when you talk like everyone who disagrees with you is the enemy. That hit somewhere deeper. De Niro looked away, jaw tight. The camera stayed on him, unblinking. This was no longer a debate. It was a man confronting how the world saw him. You know what scares me, he said finally. That being calm, being nice, being patient, none of it worked. And now people want to blame the ones who are angry. The audience clapped then, more unified this time. Anger, after all, was something many of them recognized. Whoopi listened. She didn't interrupt. When she spoke, her voice was lower, more intimate. What scares me, she said, is that anger becomes the only language we use. And once that happens, nobody hears anything else. They locked eyes. Two legends. Two truths. Neither willing to fully yield. The moderator finally stepped in, gently but firmly. We're going to take another short break, she said, forcing a smile. When we come back. But the damage was already done. Phones were out. Clips were being clipped. Hashtags were forming in real time. Backstage, staff whispered about whether this would trend as bravery or disaster. As the cameras faded to black again, De Niro leaned back, staring at the ceiling lights. Whoopi folded her hands, exhaling slowly, like someone who knew the hardest part was still ahead. Because when they came back for the final segment, there would be no room left for restraint. Only truth. And consequences. The studio came back from break without warning. No easing music, no light banter to soften the landing. Just the sudden glow of the cameras and the low murmur of an audience that knew it was about to witness something they'd be talking about long after the credits rolled. The table of the View looked less like a place for conversation now, and more like a fault line. Robert De Niro sat upright, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. The anger hadn't vanished during the break. It had settled, condensed into something heavier. More dangerous. The kind of anger that doesn't shout. The kind that chooses its words carefully. Across from him, Whoopi Goldberg adjusted slightly in her chair, grounding herself. She'd felt the shift too. This wasn't about sound bites anymore. This was about identity. Legacy. What you leave behind when the noise finally fades. The moderator tried once more to reclaim the room. Robert, Whoopi, people watching at home are saying this feels bigger than politics, she said cautiously. It feels personal. De Niro let out a slow breath. It is personal, he said. Because I didn't get to where I am by staying quiet when something felt wrong. Whoopi nodded. Neither did I. That simple agreement startled the audience. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. For a fleeting second, it seemed like common ground might actually exist. But De Niro kept going. The difference, he said, is that I'm tired of being told how to express my outrage. Tired of being told to soften it so it's easier to digest. Whoopi leaned forward, elbows on the table. And I'm tired of people confusing outrage with effectiveness, she replied. Being loud doesn't always mean being heard. De Niro's eyes flashed. You think I don't know that? He asked. I've spent my entire life studying people, listening to them, playing them. I know exactly how they think. Then you should know, Whoopi said, voice calm but cutting, that when people feel attacked, they stop listening. Period. The audience reacted instantly. A sharp split, applause on one side, tense silence on the other. De Niro shook his head slowly. That sounds good, he said. It sounds reasonable. But it assumes everyone wants to listen. He leaned closer, voice dropping. Some people don't want conversation. They want permission. The words landed hard. Whoopi's expression tightened, not in anger, but in concern. And who are you talking about when you say some people? She asked. De Niro didn't answer right away. The pause stretched, heavy and deliberate. The camera cut to the audience, faces frozen, eyes wide. Then back to him. Anyone, he said finally, who hides behind indifference while things fall apart. Whoopi exhaled through her nose. See, she said quietly, that right there. That's the problem. You just turned disagreement into moral failure. De Niro's voice rose again, sharp now. Because sometimes it is. The audience gasped. Someone audibly whispered, "Oh my God." Whoopi sat back, shaking her head slowly. That's a slippery slope, she said. Once you decide you're the judge of who's good and who's bad, you stop seeing humanity. De Niro laughed again, but there was no humor in it. I see humanity just fine, he said. I see people suffering while others argue about tone. That struck something raw. Whoopi's voice softened, but the weight behind it doubled. And I see people who are so angry they forget that change doesn't come from humiliation, she said. It comes from connection. They stared at each other now, not as celebrities, not as hosts and guests, but as two people who had lived long enough to know that certainty could be both a weapon and a shield. The moderator attempted to interject again, but the moment had outgrown her. De Niro turned slightly toward the audience. You know what the truth is, he said. People cheer courage until it makes them uncomfortable. Then they call it dangerous. A wave of applause surged through the studio, louder than before. It rattled the walls. Whoopi waited for it to die down. When she spoke, she didn't raise her voice at all. And people call themselves brave, she said, when sometimes they're just unwilling to do the harder work of listening. The applause faltered, then split again. De Niro looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing not an opponent, but a mirror that reflected a version of himself he didn't fully recognize. You think I haven't listened? He asked quietly. I think you've listened, Whoopi replied. I just think you stopped believing anyone else could be right. Silence. Not the awkward kind. The dangerous kind. The control room was probably screaming. Producers likely debated cutting away, rolling credits early, salvaging what they could. But no one pulled the plug. Because this was real. De Niro leaned back, eyes glistening under the studio lights. You know what hurts, he said. Being told that caring too much is a flaw. Whoopi's expression changed. Something in her eyes softened, visibly. No, she said gently. Being told to stop caring would be a flaw. I'm asking you to care without burning everything around you. They both sat there, breathing the same air, carrying different scars. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent, so they did neither. The moderator glanced at the clock, then back at them. We have just a few minutes left, she said carefully. Is there anything either of you wants to say, to each other? The question hung like a challenge. De Niro turned back to Whoopi. I don't want to be polite, he said. But I don't want to be misunderstood either. Whoopi nodded slowly. Then don't confuse anger with truth, she said. And I won't confuse calm with complacency. For a moment, just one, it felt like a ceasefire. But the damage was already done. The audience could feel it. The crew could feel it. Somewhere beyond the studio walls, the internet was already tearing itself in half. And as the cameras prepared to roll into the final moments of the show, one thing was painfully clear. Whatever happened next wouldn't stay in that room. Not for a long time. The final minutes of the broadcast arrived not with relief, but with weight. You could see it in the way the audience sat unnaturally still, as if any movement might fracture what little balance remained in the room. The table at the View no longer felt like a place for discussion. It felt like the epicenter of something that had already detonated. The moderator's voice came in softly, almost reverently, as though she were stepping around broken glass. We're almost out of time, she said. This conversation clearly struck a nerve. No one laughed. No one clapped. Robert De Niro stared down at the table, eyes unfocused, like he was replaying every word he'd said, and every word he hadn't. The fire was still there, but now it was tangled with something else. Fatigue. Reflection. Maybe regret. Or maybe just the exhaustion of carrying conviction for too long without relief. Across from him, Whoopi Goldberg sat upright, composed, but not untouched. Her jaw tightened slightly, a subtle sign that this conversation had cost her something too. She wasn't celebrating a win. She wasn't even certain there was one. The moderator turned to De Niro first. Robert, she asked, after everything that's been said today, do you stand by the way you speak out? De Niro didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched. Then he looked up, not at Whoopi, not at the moderator, but straight into the camera, into millions of living rooms, into the judgment of people who would slice his words into clips before the hour was over. I stand by caring, he said slowly. I stand by refusing to pretend everything's fine when it's not. A ripple of applause moved through the audience, cautious but sincere. But, he added, voice tightening, maybe I don't always get it right. Maybe anger isn't the only way, but it's the one that feels honest to me. That admission hit harder than any outburst. Whoopi blinked just once. The moderator turned to her. Whoopi. She took a breath, steady and measured. I stand by speaking plainly, she said. By calling things out. By not shrinking myself so other people feel comfortable. A murmur of approval spread. But I also stand by this, she continued, turning to Niro now, meeting his gaze head-on. If we stop listening to each other, we don't win anything. We just get louder. And lonelier. The audience applauded, this time, more unified than at any point before. De Niro nodded slowly. Not in agreement. In acknowledgement. The red light blinked. And then it went dark. The show was over. But the moment was just beginning. Within minutes, clips flooded social media. Not summaries, moments. De Niro's line about silence. Whoopi's warning about anger. The stare-downs. The pauses. The gasps. Every frame dissected, captioned, recaptioned. Trending topics ignited like brushfires. De Niro unfiltered. Whoopi stands her ground. Awkward. Brave. Disastrous. Necessary. There was no consensus, only sides. Some praised De Niro for saying what others were too afraid to say. They called him fearless. Honest. A man finally done playing nice. Others accused him of being reckless, of mistaking outrage for leadership, of hardening lines that were already too sharp. Whoopi became a symbol too. For some, she was the voice of reason, the reminder that passion without empathy can scorch everything in its path. For others, she was accused of tone policing, of asking for calm in a moment that demanded fire. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Long threads. Short insults. Think pieces drafted before the episode even finished airing. Memes followed, as they always do, humor trying to cope with discomfort. Backstage, staff members whispered about the fallout. Producers debated whether they'd crossed a line or captured lightning. In private, De Niro left the building without stopping for interviews. No waves. No smiles. Just a man walking into the night, shoulders hunched, face unreadable. Whoopi stayed longer. She hugged a crew member. Spoke quietly to another host. When she finally stepped outside, cameras flashed, but she didn't comment. She didn't need to. Her words were already echoing everywhere. By morning, headlines were split straight down the middle. Explosive TV moment. A necessary conversation. A house divided on daytime television. And viewers? They were still arguing. Weeks from now, the specifics might blur. But the feeling wouldn't. That tightness in the chest. That sense of watching something raw, unscripted, unresolved. Because this wasn't a clean ending. It was a mirror. And everyone saw something different in it. Now it's your turn. What did you see in that moment? Was it courage or conflict without control? Was it truth or two truths colliding with no room left to bend? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you stand. And if you want more stories like this, more unfiltered moments, more tension, more cinematic deep dives into the clashes that shake pop culture, make sure you subscribe to Stage View. Because some conversations don't fade when the cameras turn off. They follow us home.